Thanks for joining us here on 9 News Plus. Now, the Denver Broncos spent a lot of money this offseason to shore up specifically their offensive line, and they ended up doling out about $235 million worth of contracts this free agency period, by far the most of any NFL team. The Broncos really addressed their offensive line, as mentioned, in particular, signing right tackle Mike McGlinchey to an $87.5 million contract, and left guard Ben Powers, formerly of the Baltimore Ravens. They also signed defensive end Zach Allen and running back Samaje Perine, amongst other players. Now, for a bit more on what the Broncos did and what else they might do, we're now joined by 9 News Broncos Insider Mike Klis. Mike, thanks so much for joining us here on 9 News Plus.
Right on, Chris. Always enjoy the show.
Always enjoy having you on. Now, Mike, first of all, what's your overall view on what the Broncos did during this free agency period?
I have a couple thoughts on it. One, what I really liked about it, or there's a couple points here. You have new ownership, right? Greg Penner and Rob Walton, and they're the richest owners in sports. And they showed it right away. They showed it a couple times. What did they put? 400,000 in a new sod or something like that. 40,000, I think, in a new sod for one game at the end of the year, because the high school playoffs had chewed up the field, and for safety's sake, they got the field going. And then they, like you said, they spend way more than any other team, by 33% over the second most spending team, which was the New Orleans Saints. So that's impressive. The Broncos, there are four pillars, Chris, to an NFL franchise that are very important. One is ownership, two is a head coach, three is a quarterback, four is the general manager. The owner is really the least important unless there's trouble. The owner comes in when you need a new head coach and you got to hire one. You need a new GM, you got to hire one. You got to pay for players. That's where the owner comes in. So the Broncos are in good hands with the owner. Now, what about the other three pillars? That's the question. Sean Payton, I think, was an excellent hire for the Broncos this offseason. But as far as, the free agency itself, you don't want to be in this position all the time. You want to balance between draft picks and free agency. You don't want to lead the league in spending every March. That's not good. That means you've got too many holes. You've got to fortify that roster up and down from 1 to 53 with the draft. And the Broncos didn't have a first and second round draft pick. So because they had that gaping hole at first and second round for the second year in a row, they had to spend in free agency, and spend they did. As for what they spent on, I like it because it was substance over surface, substance over flash. Substance is up front. That's what Sean Payton believes in. Two offensive linemen, Mike McGlinchey and Ben Powers. Together, they're making $31 million cash, $31 million on average in 2023. That's putting money behind what has been a weakness for the Broncos, especially at right tackle. I kind of disagree that they had a weakness at left guard. I think Dalton Risner was a fine left guard for 4 years for the Broncos. But at right tackle, that's been a hole, no doubt about it. And then also on the defensive line, they chose Zach Allen instead of Draymond Jones, which was a peculiar decision because most people would agree that Draymond's a better athlete, has higher skill set. But Zach Allen for $2 million a year less is probably tougher against the run, more consistent. Draymond can make plays against the run. It's just he's just a little inconsistent on it. And Zach Allen more consistent, a tougher guy inside. So the up front, both sides, their top three spending. Zach Allen, $15.25 million. That's where they put their money up front. Men, they want to be. Sean Payton wants to be bigger than the other team up front, and they did that through free agency. And they brought Alex Singleton back at $6 million a year. He was their fourth biggest guy. I thought that was key because Alex Singleton is just one fine inside linebacker. Him and Josie Jewell together, they're going to be able to stop the run, I think, better in 2023. So I like what they did in free agency, but they don't have much to follow that up with as far as the draft. They do have 2 picks in the 3rd round. Got to hit on both. And but otherwise, Chris, it's still about number 3, Russell Wilson, and see what he's got here with his new head coach and fortified offensive line.
Well, you said it there, Mike. It's all about number 3 at the end of the day. Now, in a sense, with Sean Payton, you get Tim Patrick back as well, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton. You got a good receiving core. There's no real excuses now for Russell Wilson, are there?
Correct. By the way, I hope Mike McGlinchey, who's 6'8", I hope he can block and duck at the same time, so Russ can get the ball. So Russ can get that ball out to the right flat, or the right seam. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's not, and there was 55 sacks that Russell Wilson took in 15 games. He missed 2 games, and he's still tied for first in the NFL with 55 sacks with Justin Fields, another guy who's an athletic, kind of a scrambler, and Fields. Russ is supposed to be able to read a little quicker. And he's going to have to do that. That's where Sean Payton comes in. Sean Payton's going to have an offense and say, Russ, you got to do this. And Russ has got to do that. And so, Riley Dixon is coming to the Broncos, back to the Broncos as a punter, by the way. So that's breaking as we speak. So anyway, the former punter of the Broncos, and now coming back. So that's good. He went with the Giants, and he was with the LA Rams last year. So we had him on our list of possibilities in the top 9 possibilities there for free agent. So Corliss Waitman looks like he's in trouble to keep his job with Riley Dixon coming back. So there you go, Chris. And then, but yeah, Russell Wilson, he's got his coach. He's got his offensive line. You're right about the receivers. They tried to maybe upgrade a little bit with the receivers. A key is KJ Hamler coming back healthy. They need speed out there. And with Sean Payton, who, if you look at him statistically, has been a top 10 offense, not only a good head coach where he averages 10, 11 wins a year, but offensively, they rank in the top 10 almost every year. So, yeah, got to have a bounce back year from Russ.
Well, no doubt about that. And one thing that may potentially help, at least in the long term, is Jerry Jeudy's 5th-year option is up. I think the due date is in early May as to whether or not the Broncos pick up that 5th-year option for 2024. Have you heard anything on what the Broncos might do there?
Yeah, they're probably going to pick it up. That would be the expectation. It's 12.987 to be exact, so call it 13. And yes, with the way Jeudy finished right now, it's May 2nd, which is 12 days away, the deadline. And all indications I get is the Broncos will pick it up. See what happens. New England really gave the Broncos a good offer for Jeudy. I think a 2nd round and maybe a 4th. But then the Broncos what would they do without Jeudy? He was a 1st-round pick, number 15 overall, coming into his own. So he's still a Bronco, and I anticipate he will be a Bronco in 2023. See if he can build on those last 6 games where he really came on as a number 1 receiver.
No doubt about that. What other moves might the Broncos make? You mentioned obviously the key or the kind of core part of free agency probably over and done with, but any other moves that you might see the Broncos making here?
Well, they got there's a safety position opening, and from what I understand, they'd like Kareem back. Sean Payton likes Kareem the way he plays. He's 35, so the legs aren't 25, which is what you prefer at safety. But like everything else about Kareem's game and his leadership, his locker room presence. So we'll see if they can bring Kareem back. Broncos trying to get him back on the they got him back for $2 million last year. I'm sure they'd like to get him for $2 or $3 million again. Kareem probably looking at $5 million with the way he's playing. We'll see how that shakes out. But I think another safety. They like Caden Stearns, but he's coming off that hip surgery, and I'm not sure he's quite ready to be a starter. Had he finished the season healthy last year, I think he would have been the starter. But because he had that hip surgery and really only played about 5 games last year. It's tough to count on him to be the starter. So safety, I think, is the big one. Riley Dixon fills the punter deal, and he'll be the holder. McManus likes him, so I think they're all but set. When you spend the most, that's enough, and so that's where they're at right now.
That's interesting. And I guess to kind of wrap things up here, Mike, from a broad perspective, let's go back maybe 2 months or 2.5 months, the end of the 2022 season, and where the Broncos were then and where they are now. How much better of a team would you say the Broncos are now compared to then?
They're better, no doubt about it. They're better. That they're better up front. At least they're the way they evaluate. I think especially at right tackle, if McGlinchey is getting paid $17.5 million a year, if he comes through and finally ends that cycle, he'll be the 11th starting right tackle to open a season in 11 years. That has to stop, and McGlinchey, they're counting on him to be the answer there. So we'll see if he is. But they are better, and the biggest offseason acquisition, Chris, was Sean Payton, and they paid a pretty penny for him, I understand too. Coaching salaries aren't available, but it's it's north of $15 million a year from what I understand, and he's up there as the highest paid coach, if not the highest, close to it. So I think Sean Payton and better up front is where the Broncos really made hay this offseason. Still some question marks. You're still talking about a 5-12 team. You still got the Chiefs in the division. Got to end that 15-game losing streak against the Chiefs somehow, some way. I think Sean Payton will do it. If they can beat the Chiefs at home this year, I think expectations are 10-7, 11-6. I think those are realistic, and making the playoffs.
I think that would be a big step compared to what happened a year ago. But, well, Mike, we really appreciate a few minutes of your time, lending us your expertise and your insight about a pretty eventful offseason and free agency period for the Denver Broncos. But 90s Broncos Insider Mike Klis, thanks so much for joining us here on 90s Plus today.
Thank you, Chris. Go get them.